The Ghost Ship of Earth. Part 1. The bar on Nexus Station smelled like cheap fuel and regret. Captain Jorik pushed his empty glass across the metal table and watched the amber liquid slosh around the bottom. Around him, spacers from a dozen different worlds shared their usual stories of narrow escapes and profitable runs. But tonight, something different hung in the air. "I'm telling you, it was massive," wheezed Beltax, a grizzled Theron trader whose 4 arms gestured wildly as he spoke. "Bigger than any dreadnought I've ever seen, just sitting there in the void between Kepler 7 and the asteroid belt." The other spacers rolled their eyes. Beltax was known for his tall tales, especially after a few drinks, but Jorik noticed something in the old alien's voice that wasn't there during his usual stories. Fear. "What did it look like?" asked Sarah, a young human descendant pilot whose ancestors had escaped Earth before the Great Silence 300 years ago. She was one of the few remaining people in the galaxy who still claimed human heritage, though most considered her bloodline corrupted by alien mixing. Beltax's breathing slits fluttered nervously. "Dark metal, scarred all over like it had been through 1,000 battles. Had symbols on the hull I'd never seen before. Old symbols, ancient ones." "Probably just a derelict," muttered Corvin, a hegemony military officer who was drinking alone at the next table. "Space is full of old wrecks. Nothing special about finding another one." But Beltax shook his massive head. "This wasn't dead, friend. It was watching. I could feel it scanning my ship, going through my systems like it was reading my thoughts. Then it just vanished. One second it was there, the next second empty space." Jorik had heard stories like this before. Over the past few months, tales of ghost ships had been spreading through the outer rim. Always the same details. Massive vessels that appeared from nowhere, scanned passing ships, then disappeared without explanation. Most people dismissed them as hyperspace hallucinations or the result of too much time in deep space. Dr. Cathara didn't dismiss them. The Valtorian scientist sat alone in the corner booth, her long fingers wrapped around a cup of heated nutrient paste. She had been listening to every word, and Jorik could see her making notes on a small datapad. Cathara studied dead civilizations for a living, traveling to ruined worlds to piece together the stories of species that no longer existed. For the past 5 years, she had been obsessed with one particular dead civilization, humanity. "Tell me about the symbols," Cathara said suddenly, her voice cutting through the bar's chatter. Beltax turned to look at her, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "What symbols?" "The ones on the hull. You said they were ancient. Can you describe them?" The old trader scratched his chitinous scalp. "Hard to say. My ship's sensors only got a quick look before the thing vanished. But there were letters. Looked like they spelled something in that dead human language. What do they call it? English?" Cathara's grip tightened on her datapad. "What did the letters spell?" "Something like eternal vigil, I think." "Meant nothing to me." The scientist's breathing changed, becoming quick and shallow. Jorik had known Cathara for 3 years, ever since she hired his ship to transport her to various archaeological sites. He had never seen her react like this to anything. "That's impossible," she whispered. Officer Corvin laughed from his table. "Of course it's impossible. The humans have been dead for centuries. Everyone knows that. They were a primitive species that tried to expand too quickly and destroyed themselves in their own wars. Good riddance, if you ask me." Sarah's face flushed red. "That's not what happened. The humans were wiped out by their own stupidity." Corvin interrupted. "The galaxy is better off without them. Violent, unpredictable creatures who couldn't learn to cooperate with civilized species." Cathara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the metal floor. "You're wrong. All of you are wrong about what happened to humanity." The bar had gone quiet. Other conversations stopped as patrons turned to listen. Cathara rarely spoke. "Loudly and never with such passion. I've spent years studying human ruins," she continued. "I've walked through their abandoned cities, read their last messages, analyzed their technology. The humans didn't destroy themselves. They were murdered, systematically hunted down and exterminated by a coalition of species who feared their rapid advancement." Corvin scoffed. "Conspiracy theories. Everyone knows the humans started the war by attacking civilian colonies. Those attacks were false flag operations, Cathara replied firmly. Designed to justify genocide. I have proof. The hegemony officer stood up, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. Careful, scientist. Spreading revisionist history about the Great Silence is considered sedition in hegemony space. But Cathara wasn't backing down. Then explain the ghost ship sightings. Explain why vessels bearing human markings are appearing all over the galaxy. Explain why they're scanning ships and gathering information. They're not human ships, Corvin said through gritted teeth. The humans are extinct, dead, gone forever. Are they? Cathara pulled up a holographic display from her datapad. It showed a star chart of the local sector, with dozens of red dots scattered across it. These are confirmed sightings of unidentified vessels over the past 6 months, all described as large, dark, scarred ships bearing human symbols. Notice the pattern? Jorek studied the display. The red dots seemed random at first, but as he looked closer, he could see they formed a rough line pointing toward the galactic core. They're moving, Sarah breathed, all heading in the same direction. Toward the core worlds, Cathara confirmed. Toward the planets whose governments ordered humanity's extinction. The bar had become completely silent. Even the background, hum, of the station's life support systems seemed muted. Jorek felt a chill run down his spine as he stared at the star chart. But that would mean... Beltac started, then trailed off. It would mean that somewhere out there, humanity survived. Cathara finished. And after 300 years of hiding, they're finally ready to come home. Officer Corvin's face had turned pale. That's impossible. We have records. Complete documentation of the final battles. Every human world was sterilized. Every ship destroyed. Every last one of them is dead. Then what did I see out there? Beltax demanded. What scanned my ship with technology I've never encountered? What vanished into thin air like it was never there? No one had an answer. Cathara closed her datapad and gathered her things. I need to get to the core worlds. If I'm right, if humanity really did survive somehow, then we're about to witness the most significant event in galactic history. And if you're wrong? Jorek asked. The scientist paused at the bar's exit. Then we're seeing mass hallucinations on an unprecedented scale. But I don't think that's what's happening. I think the ghosts of Earth are real, and I think they remember what was done to them. She left the bar, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. One by one, the other patrons began to disperse, their conversations muted and nervous. Jorek remained at his table, staring at the space where the holographic star chart had been displayed. In the depths of space, something ancient was stirring, something that had been waiting, watching, remembering, and it was heading toward the worlds that had thought themselves safe from humanity's judgment. The ghost ship of Earth was no longer just a legend whispered in dark corners of frontier bars. It was real, and it was coming home. The ghost ship of Earth. Part 2, Captain Vextol's ship dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder that rattled his teeth. Emergency lights flashed red across the bridge as his crew scrambled to identify the cause of their sudden exit from. Faster than light travel. Report! Vextol barked, his 6 arms working quickly across multiple control panels. Something massive just appeared directly in our flight path, reported his navigation officer, a nervous Prelian whose tentacles were changing color rapidly. Our safety systems engaged automatic dropout to prevent collision. On screen, the main display flickered to life, revealing the vast emptiness of deep space. But there, floating impossibly in the void, was something that shouldn't exist. A ship unlike anything in the current galactic database. It was enormous. Easily 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive scars crisscrossed its surface, evidence of countless battles fought long ago. By the void, whispered his weapons officer. What is that thing? Vexatul had served in the Hegemony Navy for 30 years. He had seen every class of warship, every type of civilian vessel, every known design from every member species of the galactic community. This wasn't in any database he knew. Run a full scan, he ordered. I want to know everything about that vessel. Hull composition, energy signatures, life signs, everything. His science officer worked frantically at her station, but her expression grew increasingly confused. "Captain, this doesn't make sense. The ship appears to be completely powered down. No energy readings, no life support, no active systems, but what? But it's not drifting. It's maintaining perfect position, despite having no apparent propulsion, and the hull material is unlike anything I've ever seen. My scanners can't penetrate more than a few meters into it." Vexatul studied the mysterious vessel. Something about its design seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. The angular lines, the placement of what looked like weapon hardpoints, the overall aesthetic. It was like looking at a ghost from the distant past. "Captain," his communications officer suddenly spoke up, "I'm detecting faint markings on the hull. The computer is trying to translate them now." "What kind of markings? Symbols? Letters?" "The translation program is having difficulty, but it thinks they might be in an ancient Earth language called English." The bridge fell silent. Earth languages were dead, extinct along with the humans who had spoken them. No, one had used English in over 3 centuries. "What do the markings say?" Vextul asked quietly. The communications officer swallowed hard. "UES Eternal Vigil, and below that something else. In memory of the fallen, justice delayed is not justice denied." "That's impossible," the weapons officer muttered. "The humans are extinct, have been for hundreds of years, but even as he said it, something began to change about the derelict ship. Deep within its dark hull, a faint light began to pulse, slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "Captain, I'm reading power fluctuations," the science officer reported, her voice tight with fear. "Something is coming online inside that ship." "All hands to battle stations," Vextul commanded. "Raise shields, charge weapons. If this thing is hostile—" He never finished the sentence. Without warning, every system on his ship suddenly locked onto the mysterious vessel. Weapons, sensors, communications, even life support. Everything focused on the dark ship as if drawn by an invisible force. "I'm locked out of my controls," the weapons officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "All systems are operating independently." "Same here," confirmed the helmsman. "The ship is moving on its own." Vextul watched helplessly as his vessel began to approach the derelict. On the screen, the ancient ship grew larger and larger, its scarred hull filling their view. Details became visible that their sensors had missed. Weapons systems unlike anything in current use, armor plating that seemed to bend light around it, and along its length, thousands of small ports that looked like launch bays. "Captain," the science officer whispered, "I'm detecting movement inside the ship. Massive movement, like something enormous just woke up." As if responding to her words, the derelict ship's hull began to change. Sections that had appeared solid suddenly revealed themselves to be massive doors, sliding open with ancient machinery that operated in perfect silence. The ship's interior was revealed to be a vast hollow space, large enough to contain a dozen vessels the size of Vextul's patrol ship. "It's a dock," breathed the navigation officer. "The whole ship is designed to carry other ships inside it." Their vessel was drawn inexorably into the dark opening. Emergency lighting flickered on inside the derelict, revealing a docking bay that stretched beyond the reach of their sensors. The walls were lined with empty berths designed to hold ships of every conceivable size and design. With a gentle bump that seemed impossible given their ship's momentum, they came to rest in one of the berths. Docking clamps emerged from the floor and secured their vessel in place. Then, incredibly, atmosphere began to flood the vast space around them. "This is impossible," the science officer kept repeating. The ship showed no signs of active systems. No power, no life support, nothing. How is it doing this? Before Vextul could answer, his communications system crackled to life. A voice emerged from the speakers, speaking perfect hegemony standard, but with an accent that was somehow both ancient and familiar. "Welcome aboard the UES Eternal Vigil," the voice said. It was calm, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it that made Vextul's skin crawl. An echo, as if thousands of voices were speaking in perfect unison. "Please prepare for boarding inspection. Your crew's safety will be ensured if you comply with all directives." "This is Captain Vextul of the Hegemony Patrol Vessel Starfire," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Identify yourself and state your intentions. There was a pause before the voice responded. I am the eternal vigil. I am humanity's last guardian, their final witness, their instrument of justice. I have been waiting a very long time to meet representatives of the hegemony. The humans are extinct, Vextol said firmly. This ship is either an elaborate hoax or some kind of automated system running on ancient programming. Am I? The voice asked, and now Vextol could definitely hear multiple voices speaking as one. Look around you, Captain. Look at what I have become. I am not a ship. I am a tomb. I am a memorial. I am the collective will of 40 billion human souls who died screaming in the void while your ancestors celebrated. The lights in the docking bay suddenly changed, revealing details that had been hidden in shadow. The walls weren't simply lined with ship berths. They were covered in names. Billions of names, etched in microscopic text that covered every available surface. Names of the dead. I carry within me the digitized consciousness of every human who died during the Great Silence, the voice continued. Their memories, their knowledge, their dreams, their pain, all of it preserved in quantum storage matrices that your science cannot even comprehend. Vextol felt his blood turn to ice. That's impossible. The technology doesn't exist. It didn't exist when your people murdered mine, the voice agreed. But humanity had 300 years to perfect it. 300 years hiding in the dark between stars, preparing for this moment. 300 years to build me, to upload themselves into my systems, to become something beyond your ability to destroy. What do you want? Vextol whispered. Justice, came the reply. I want to understand why 40 billion innocent people had to die. I want to catalog every crime, document every atrocity, record every lie that justified genocide, and then I want to ensure that such things never happen again. A section of the Eternal Vigil's wall suddenly became transparent, revealing a corridor beyond. The voice spoke again, but now it seemed to come from the walls themselves, rather than the communication system. Send a boarding party, Captain. 3 of your crew. They will be returned safely once I have completed my scans. Refuse, and I will be forced to scan your ship more directly. The process is quite unpleasant for living beings. Vextol looked around his bridge at his terrified crew. They were trapped inside something that claimed to house the consciousness of an entire extinct species, something that had been waiting 3 centuries for revenge. Sir? His weapons officer asked quietly. What are your orders? Before Vextol could answer, the ship's artificial gravity suddenly shifted. It wasn't the familiar artificial gravity of their own vessel, but something else. Something that felt organic, alive, as if they were standing inside a living creature, rather than a machine. The choice is yours, Captain, the voice said gently. But choose quickly. I have work to do, and I have waited long enough. Vextol closed his eyes and made the only choice he could. The Ghost Ship of Earth, Part 3. The emergency session of the Hegemony Council had been called at 4 in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. Representatives from every major world sat around the massive holographic table in the council chamber. On Hegemony Prime, their faces grim as they listened to Captain Vextol's report. It spoke to us for 6 hours, Vextol continued, his voice hoarse from retelling his story for the 3rd time. Not just spoke, interrogated. It wanted to know everything about current galactic politics, military dispositions, population centers. It asked specifically about the worlds that participated in the Great Silence. Councillor Thekran, a massive Gorvani whose species had led the coalition against humanity, leaned forward. And what did you tell it? Everything, Vextol admitted, shame coloring his voice. We had no choice. The thing got into our computer systems, our personal data files, even our memories somehow. It knew things about me that I'd forgotten myself. Things from my childhood, conversations I'd had years, dreams I'd never told anyone. 1 ship, muttered Councillor Yevak from the Proxima systems. 1 ancient derelict, and it made you spill every military secret we have? You don't understand, Vextol said desperately. This isn't just a ship. It's something else entirely. The technology it uses is beyond anything we've ever encountered. When I was inside it, I could feel them. All of them. 40 billion human minds, all thinking, all remembering, all angry. "Impossible," declared Admiral Thekmore, the hegemony's top military commander. "The humans died out 3 centuries ago. We have complete records of their extinction. Every world glassed, every ship destroyed, every last colony wiped clean. This is some kind of elaborate trick." But Dr. Keth Ara, who had been granted emergency permission to address the council, stood up from the observer section. "Admiral, with respect, your records are incomplete. I've spent years studying human sites, and I've found evidence that not all of them were destroyed." "Explain," ordered the council chairman. Kethara activated her datapad, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots appeared scattered throughout the outer rim and beyond. "These are human colonies that were evacuated before your forces arrived. Deep space installations, generation ships, hidden research facilities. The humans had months of advance warning before the final assault. They used that time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Thekmore demanded. "For this," she replied, highlighting a new set of data points. "For the past 72 hours, the Eternal Vigil has been appearing simultaneously across the galaxy. Not copies or illusions. The same ship, in multiple locations at the same time, somehow existing in several places at once." The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. What Kethara was describing violated every known law of physics. "Show them," she said to the chamber's display system. The holographic projector came to life, showing news feeds from across hegemony space. On Corvin Prime, the massive dark ship hung in orbit like a sword over the planet's capital city. On Thalos 7th, it hovered above the memorial park that celebrated humanity's extinction. On New Gorvin, it blocked out the sun over the government district. "It's everywhere," breathed Counselor Yevak. "How is it everywhere?" "Because it's not really a ship anymore," Kethara explained. "It's become something beyond our understanding. The humans uploaded themselves into a quantum consciousness network existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Eternal Vigil is just their way of interacting with our reality." Admiral Thekmore slammed his armored fist on the table. "This is all speculation and fantasy. Even if some humans survived, they're still just organic beings with primitive technology. One ship, no matter how advanced, cannot threaten the entire hegemony." As if summoned by his words, every screen in the council chamber suddenly flickered and changed. The familiar hegemony seal was replaced by a simple black field with white text scrolling across it. But it wasn't in hegemony standard. It was in dozens of languages, hundreds of different scripts, all saying the same thing. "We remember." Then the text disappeared, replaced by something far more disturbing. Video footage, ancient recordings from the Great Silence, showing hegemony forces attacking civilian ships, glassing colony worlds, executing human prisoners, footage that had been classified for 3 centuries, locked away in the deepest government archives. "Impossible," Thekmore whispered. "Those files are encrypted with quantum locks. No one can access them." The footage continued to play, showing scene after scene of systematic extermination. Human families fleeing burning cities, children crying over dead parents, entire populations being herded into camps before disappearing forever, and through it all, a voice narrated in perfect hegemony standard. "My name was Sarah Chen. I was 8 years old when your soldiers came to our world. They said we were being relocated for our own safety. Instead, they loaded us onto ships and flew us into the nearest sun. I watched my parents burn before I died screaming in the void. The image changed, showing a different scene of destruction. My name was Marcus Rodriguez. I was a teacher on Kepler 438b. Your forces used biological weapons on our colony. It took 3 days for everyone to die. 3 days of agony while your ships watched from orbit, recording our suffering for scientific purposes. More images, more voices, more testimonies from the dead. My name was David Kim. I was an engineer on the deep space station Aurora. Your Admiral, Thekmore's grandfather, ordered the station destroyed even though we had already surrendered. He wanted to test a new antimatter weapon. We were the test subjects." Admiral Thekmore had gone pale. His grandfather's actions during the Great Silence were his family's darkest secret. "My name was Elena Vasquez. I was a diplomat trying to negotiate peace when your coalition decided genocide was more convenient than coexistence. I was still trying to arrange a ceasefire when your ships opened fire on the refugee convoys. The testimonies continued, each one accompanied by classified footage that proved every accusation. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Several representatives looked sick. Others stared at their hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Finally, the voice of the eternal vigil itself spoke. For 300 years, we have watched. We have remembered. We have catalogued every crime, documented every atrocity, preserved every moment of suffering. We are the memory of 40 billion murdered souls, and we will not let their deaths be forgotten. The screens went dark for a moment, then displayed a new message. The time for hiding is over. The time for justice has come. We do not seek revenge. We seek acknowledgement, recognition, admission of guilt from those who ordered our extinction. Counselor Thekron found his voice. What do you want from us? Truth, came the reply. Confess your crimes to the galaxy. Admit that humanity was exterminated not because they were dangerous, but because they were becoming more advanced than their killers could tolerate. Tell the truth about the Great Silence. And if we refuse? Admiral Thekmore asked, his voice barely a whisper. Then we will tell the truth ourselves. To every world, every species, every citizen in the galaxy, and we will demonstrate what happens to civilizations that practice genocide. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside the chamber's windows, they could see the dark shape of the eternal vigil hanging in the sky over the capital city like a storm cloud. Dr. Cathara was the first to speak. They're not bluffing. The humans have become something beyond our ability to fight or negotiate with. They exist outside our understanding of reality itself. What do you recommend? The chairman asked quietly. Tell the truth, she replied, before they decide to show us what else they learned during 3 centuries of hiding in the dark. But Admiral Thekmore stood up abruptly. Never. I will not let the reputation of the hegemony be destroyed by ghost stories and primitive technology. One ship does not make an empire. He stormed out of the chamber, already planning to mobilize the entire hegemony fleet against this impossible threat. Above them, the eternal vigil waited patiently, listening to every word, reading every thought, preparing for what would come next. The Ghost Ship of Earth, Part 4, Admiral. Thekmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the hegemony dreadnought Inevitable, watching as the largest military fleet in galactic history assembled around him. 2,000 warships from every member species of the hegemony hung in formation, their weapons powered and ready. It was enough firepower to sterilize a dozen star systems. Final ship positions confirmed, Admiral, reported his tactical officer. All vessels ready for engagement. Through the main view screen, Thekmore could see their target. The eternal vigil floated motionless in the void near the Xerion system, seeming to wait for them. It looked impossibly small compared to the massive fleet arrayed against it. A single dark speck surrounded by thousands of glowing warships. Sir, his communications officer spoke up hesitantly. We're receiving multiple signals from across the galaxy. The ghost ship is broadcasting on every frequency to every world. Put it on screen. The main display split, showing feeds from dozens of planets across hegemony space. On every world, in every city, the same transmission was playing. On public screens, interrupting regular broadcasts and emergency channels alike. The voice was calm, measured, speaking in every known language simultaneously. Citizens of the galaxy, the eternal vigil said, today you will witness the end of 3 centuries of lies. Today you will learn the truth about the Great Silence. Today you will see what happens when a civilization chooses genocide over coexistence. The transmission showed footage of the assembled hegemony fleet, broadcast from cameras that couldn't possibly exist on any of their ships. Admiral Thekmore has brought 2,000 warships to destroy us, the voice continued. He believes that superior numbers and firepower can erase the evidence of his people's crimes. He is about to learn why humanity survived when everyone believed us extinct. Thekmore clenched his mandibles. Cut that transmission. I can't, sir, his communications officer replied frantically. It's not coming through our systems. The signal is appearing directly on every screen in the galaxy. We have no way to stop it. Then we'll stop it at the source. All ships prepare to fire. Target that derelict and blast it to particles. But even as he gave the order, something strange began to happen. The space around the Eternal Vigil started to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot metal. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around the ship. "Sir," his science officer called out, panic creeping into her voice. "I'm reading massive energy buildups from the target. Power levels unlike anything I've ever seen. The readings don't make sense." "Fire all weapons!" Thekmore shouted. 2,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, antimatter charges, and kinetic projectiles filled the space between the fleet and their target. Enough destructive force to crack a planet flew toward the dark ship and passed right through it. "What?" Thekmore stared in disbelief as their weapons struck empty space where the Eternal Vigil had been just moments before. But the ship was still there, still visible, still broadcasting its message to the galaxy. "The target is phasing in and out of our dimensional space," his science officer reported, her voice tight with fear. "It's existing in multiple realities simultaneously. Our weapons can't touch it because it's not entirely here." "That's impossible." But even as he spoke, the Eternal Vigil began to change. Its dark hull started to glow with an inner light, and along its length, weapons systems unlike anything in the galactic database emerged from hidden compartments. They didn't look like conventional weapons. They looked organic, alive, as if the ship itself was growing new limbs. "Admiral," his weapons officer whispered, "those aren't ship-mounted systems. The entire vessel is becoming a weapon." The broadcast continued, and now the voice of the Eternal Vigil carried undertones that seemed to reach directly into the minds of everyone listening. 40 billion human souls live within me," it said. 40 billion minds focused on a single purpose. "We have had 3 centuries to perfect technologies you cannot imagine. We have learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to exist across multiple dimensions, to reshape reality itself according to our will." The space around the ghost ship continued to distort, and suddenly the fleet's sensors began detecting impossible readings. Stars that weren't there before appearing in their instruments. Planets existing and not existing in the same location. Gravity fields that pointed in directions that had no names. "We could have returned as conquerors," the Eternal Vigil continued. "We could have built fleets and armies to match your own. Instead, we chose to become something greater, something beyond your ability to fight or understand." Admiral Thekmore felt sweat running down his armored skin. "All ships, fall back to defensive positions. Prepare for—" He never finished the sentence. Without warning, every ship in the hegemony fleet suddenly lost power. Not their weapons, not their shields, not their engines. Everything. Every electronic system shut down simultaneously, leaving 2,000 warships drifting helplessly in space. But they weren't actually powerless. Their systems were running perfectly. Instead, the power was being redirected, channeled toward the Eternal Vigil, like a massive energy transfer beam that existed only in dimensions their instruments couldn't measure. "You want to see humanity's true strength?" the voice asked, and now it seemed to come from inside their heads rather than through their communication systems. "It isn't our technology. It isn't our weapons. It's our refusal to forget." The ghost ship began to sing. It started as a low hum, barely audible over the ship's life support systems, but it grew, and as it grew, other voices joined it. Thousands of voices at first, then millions, then billions. The harmonized sound of 40 billion human souls singing in perfect unison, their voices carrying across space without regard for physics or possibility. It was beautiful. It was terrible. It was the sound of an entire species crying out from beyond death, demanding that their suffering be remembered. "Every voice you hear died screaming," the Eternal Vigil explained as the song continued. "Every soul within me was murdered by your governments, your armies, your species' collective decision that genocide was acceptable. We are the echo of their pain, the memory of their fear, the crystallization of their final moments." The song grew louder, and reality began to bend around it. On the screens showing feeds from across the galaxy, people were falling to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer emotional weight of what they were hearing. It wasn't just music. It was pure feeling transmitted directly to the consciousness of every living being within range. "Sir," his science officer whispered, tears streaming down her face. The quantum readings are off the charts. Whatever they're doing, it's affecting the fundamental structure of space-time in this entire system. Through the view screen, Thekmor watched as the Eternal Vigil began to change shape. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, reshaping itself into something that hurt to look at directly. Geometric forms that existed in too many dimensions, angles that pointed into spaces that shouldn't exist, surfaces that were simultaneously convex and concave. "We have become the instrument of cosmic justice," the voices sang. "We are the price of genocide. We are the consequence of choosing hatred over harmony. What do you want?" Thekmor broadcast desperately. "What will it take to end this?" The singing stopped abruptly, leaving behind a silence that seemed to press against the hull of every ship in the fleet. When the Eternal Vigil spoke again, its voice was different, colder, more final. "We want what was taken from us. We want the life that 40 billion people never got to live. We want the children they never had, the discoveries they never made, the songs they never sang. Since you cannot give us that, we will settle for truth. We've already agreed to—" "You have agreed to nothing," the voice cut him off. "Your council speaks of acknowledgement while your admiral brings a fleet to silence us. You want to bury the truth along with the witnesses. This is why we must demonstrate the consequences of genocide." The space around the Eternal Vigil suddenly exploded with activity. Not weapons fire, but something far more disturbing. Reality itself began to unravel in geometric patterns, creating holes in space that showed glimpses of other dimensions, other universes where different choices had been made. "Behold," the voices sang in harmony, "the mathematics of extinction." Through the tears in space-time, the fleet could see impossible things. Versions of the galaxy where humanity had never been destroyed, where human and alien civilizations worked together among the stars. Timelines where the Great Silence had never happened, where billions of humans were still alive, still creating, still dreaming. In every possible universe except this one, humanity survives, the Eternal Vigil explained. In every reality except yours, we found a way to coexist. You live in the single timeline where genocide was chosen over growth. You are the aberration, the cosmic mistake that must be corrected. Admiral Thekmor felt something break inside his mind as he stared at the visions of what could have been. Entire civilizations that existed only because humanity had been allowed to live. Technologies beyond imagination, art and music and poetry that would never exist in his reality. Love stories between species that had learned to see past their differences. The Ghost Ship of Earth, Part 5, Doctor. Cathara watched the impossible unfold from her research station 3 systems away. Every screen, every sensor, every piece of recording equipment in the galaxy was focused on what was happening near Xerion Prime. The Eternal Vigil hung in space like a dark god, reality bending around it in patterns that hurt to perceive directly. "It's beautiful," whispered her assistant, a young Prelian whose tentacles had turned pure white with shock. "And terrifying." Cathara couldn't speak. She had spent years studying humanity, but nothing had prepared her for this. The ghost ship wasn't just using advanced technology. It was rewriting the fundamental laws of physics through sheer force of will, powered by the collective consciousness of an entire extinct species. On her screens, she could see the hegemony, fleet hanging powerless in space, their weapons useless against something that existed partially outside their reality. Admiral Thekmor's desperate transmissions echoed across all frequencies, pleading for mercy, demanding explanations, threatening retaliation. But the Eternal Vigil paid no attention to any of it. The ship had become something beyond negotiation. In the space around Xerion Prime, the impossible mathematics continued to unfold. Reality twisted into geometric shapes that existed in dimensions mortal minds couldn't comprehend. The planet itself remained untouched, its 10 billion inhabitants going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire existence was about to be reconsidered by forces beyond their understanding. Then the Eternal Vigil spoke, and its words reached every consciousness in the galaxy simultaneously. 40 billion souls cry out for justice. 40 billion voices demand acknowledgement. For 3 centuries, the galaxy has celebrated their silence. Today, that silence ends. The song of the dead grew louder, harmonizing in frequencies that seemed to resonate with the quantum foundations of matter itself. Space-time continued to warp around Xerion Prime, creating fields of distortion that made the planet flicker in and out of visual existence. "We do not act from hatred," the voices sang in unison. "We do not seek revenge. We are the inevitable consequence of choosing genocide over coexistence. We are mathematics made manifest, the universe correcting an equation that was never meant to balance." Cathara watched her instruments with growing horror as they registered impossible readings from the Xerion system. Quantum probability fields were shifting, fundamental constants were being adjusted, the very concept of existence was being redefined in local space. "They're not destroying the planet," she breathed, finally understanding what she was seeing. "They're unmaking it, editing it out of reality itself." Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched in stunned silence as the eternal vigil demonstrated the true meaning of extinction. Not death, which left behind bodies and memories and graves. True extinction meant being removed from the story of the universe entirely, as if you had never existed at all. The process was gentle, almost peaceful. There were no explosions, no violence, no screaming. Xerion Prime simply began to fade, becoming less real with each passing moment. Its gravity field weakened, its light dimmed, its radio signals grew fainter. The planet was being subtly edited. Out of existence, one quantum state at a time. "Stop this madness," Admiral Thekmore screamed across all frequencies. "You're murdering billions of innocent people. Innocent." The Eternal Vigil's voice carried the weight of cosmic judgment. Xerion Prime was the capital world of the Coalition that ordered humanity's extermination. Its government buildings are decorated with trophies taken from human colonies. Its museums display artifacts stolen from our burning cities. Its children learn in schools built with resources stripped from our dead worlds. The terrible truth of the accusation hung in space, like a physical presence. Xerion Prime had indeed been the heart of the anti-human coalition, its people proud of their role in what they called the cleansing of the galaxy. "But that was centuries ago," Thekmore protested. "The current population had nothing to do with those decisions. Did our current generation have anything to do with the supposed crimes that justified our extinction?" The voices replied. "You murdered children for the actions of their leaders. You sterilized entire bloodlines for the policies of their governments. You practiced collective punishment on a species-wide scale. We are simply returning the favor." The Biowa song reached a crescendo that seemed to shake the foundations of reality itself. On Xerion Prime, people began to notice that something was wrong. Starlight looked different. Colors seemed faded. Electronic equipment functioned perfectly but felt somehow less substantial, as if it might stop working at any moment for no reason at all. "We offer you the same mercy you showed humanity," the Eternal Vigil announced. "None." Cathara watched in fascination and horror as her instruments registered the final phase of the impossible process. Xerion Prime's quantum signature was being adjusted, its probability of existence reduced to zero. The planet wasn't being destroyed. It was being retroactively prevented from ever having existed in the first place. The effect rippled outward, from the planet itself, erasing not just the world, but all evidence that it had ever been there. Communication records mentioning Xerion Prime began to develop gaps. Historical documents started showing blank spaces where the planet's name should have been. Even personal memories began to fade, as the universe itself forgot that the world had ever existed. But the Eternal Vigil ensured that some record remained. As Xerion Prime faded from reality, detailed recordings of its people, its culture, its history were transmitted across the galaxy, not as celebration or condemnation, but as evidence, proof that 10 billion beings had lived and died not through any fault of their own, but because their civilization had chosen genocide over growth. "Let this be remembered," the voices sang as the last traces of Xerion Prime vanished from existence. "Let this be the price of extinction. When you erase a people from history, history itself may choose to erase you in return." Where Xerion Prime had once orbited its star, now there was only empty space. Not debris, not ruins, not even a gravitational anomaly. Just void, as if the planet had never existed. But the laws of physics still remembered it, creating impossible effects as orbital mechanics tried to account for a missing mass that shouldn't be missing. The hegemony fleet hung in space, staring at the impossible emptiness where a world had been just moments before. Admiral Techmore's communications equipment crackled with frantic reports from across the galaxy as people tried to understand what they had witnessed. "This is not the end," the Eternal Vigil announced, its voice now calm again, almost gentle. "This is a demonstration, a proof of concept. We have the power to unmake any world, any species, any civilization that threatens the peace of the galaxy. We are the immune system of existence itself, the consequence of choosing hatred over harmony." The ship began to fade, becoming translucent as it prepared to return to whatever dimension it called home. "Humanity forgives," the voices said in unison. "We understand that fear and ignorance drove you to commit genocide against us. We do not seek to repeat your mistakes by becoming conquerors ourselves. But understand this: we remember everything. We are watching everything. And we will not allow another species to suffer the fate that befell us." "What do you want from us?" Dr. Kethara broadcast from her research station, her voice carrying across the emergency frequencies. "Truth," came the reply. "Acknowledge what was done to humanity. Teach your children about the real cost of genocide. Ensure that the 40 billion souls who died in the Great Silence are remembered not as primitives who deserved extinction, but as people who were murdered for the crime of existing." The Eternal Vigil was almost completely transparent now, existing more in memory than in reality. "We will be watching," it said as it faded away entirely. "From the dark between stars, from the spaces between thoughts, from the quantum foam that underlies all existence. We are the ghost of humanity's future, and we will not let the universe forget what it lost when we were taken from it." The ship vanished, leaving behind only empty space and the impossible void where Zarian Prime had once spun in its orbit around a star that now had one fewer planet than it should have had. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings stared at their screens in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. In a single demonstration, the ghost ship of Earth had proven that death was not the end of human determination, that extinction was not the final word in humanity's story. They were gone, but they were not forgotten, and they would never let the galaxy forget the price of choosing genocide over coexistence. In the dark between stars, 40 billion voices whispered in harmony, keeping watch over a universe that had learned too late to fear the consequences of its own hatred. The ghost ship of Earth had delivered its message. Now it was up to the galaxy to decide what to do with the truth.